our Kentucky Goblin here. I'm bringing to you the first in a series of videos entitled Legends of Kentucky, where I'll be talking about different individuals who contributed to the early exploration of Kentucky and the opening up of the West. The first individual I'll be talking about will be a person we all know, have read about or heard about, and his name is Daniel Boone. In a brief summary here, Daniel Boone, born November the 2nd, 1734, died September the 26th, 1820, was an American pioneer and frontiersman whose exploits made him one of the first folk heroes of the United States. He became famous for his exploration and settlement of Kentucky, which then beyond the western borders of 13 colonies. In 1775, Boone founded the Wilderness Road through the Cumberland Gap and into Kentucky in the face of resistance from Native Americans. He founded Boonesboro, one of the first English-speaking settlements west of the Appalachian Mountains. And by the end of the 18th century, more than 200,000 people had entered Kentucky by following the route marked by Boone. Boone remains a legendary, if imperfectly remembered figure in American history. He was celebrated in his own lifetime, especially after an account of his adventures was published in 1784, making him famous in America and Europe. After his death, he became the subject of many heroic tall tales and works of fiction. His adventures, real and mythical, helped create the archetypical frontier hero of American folklore. In American popular culture, Boone is remembered as one of the foremost early frontiersmen, even though mythology often overshadows the historical details of his life, his early life. Boone spent his early years on the Pennsylvania frontier, often interacting with Native Americans. Boone learned to hunt from local settlers and Native Americans. By the age of 15, he had a reputation as one of the region's best hunters. Many stories about Boone emphasize his hunting skills, and in one tale, the young Boone was hunting in the woods with some other boys when the howl of a panther scattered all but Boone. He calmly cocked his rifle and shot the panther through the heart just as it leaped out at him. The story may be a folklore, but one of many that became part of Boone's popular image. Boone received little formal education. He preferred to spend his time hunting, apparently with his parents' blessing. According to a family tradition, when a school teacher expressed concern over Boone's education, Boone's father said, "Let the girls do the spelling and Dan will do the shooting." Boone was tutored by family members, though his spelling remained unorthodox. Let's see right here. Some historians caution that the folk image of Boone as semi-illiterate is misleading, and they argue that Boone acquired a level of literacy that was the equal of most men of his time. You know, he was pretty smart. Boone regularly took reading material with him on his hunting expeditions. The Bible and Gulliver's Travels were his favorites. He was often the only literate person in groups of frontiersmen, and would sometimes entertain his hunting companions by reading to them around the campfire. Hunter, husband, and soldier. Daniel Boone married Rebecca Bryan, a neighbor in the Yadkin Valley, on August 14, 1756. The couple initially lived in a cabin on his father's farm and eventually had 10 children, in addition to raising 8 children of deceased relatives. Boone's supporters supported his growing family in these years as a market hunter and trapper, collecting pelts for the fur trade. Almost every autumn, despite the unrest on the frontier, he would go on long hunts, extending expeditions into the wilderness lasting weeks or months. Boone went alone or with a small group of men, accumulating hundreds of deer skins in the autumn and trapping beaver and otter over the winter. When the long hunters returned in the spring, they sold their take to commercial fur traders. On their journeys, frontiersmen often carried carved messages on trees, or wrote their names on cave walls. And Boone's name or initials have been found in many places. A tree in Washington County, Tennessee reads, D. Boone killed a bear on the tree in the year 1760. A similar carving is preserved in the Museum of the Ellison Historical Society in Louisville, Kentucky, which reads, D. Boone killed a bear. The inscription may be genuine or part of a long tradition of phony relics. In the mid-1760s, Boone began to look for a new place to settle. The population was growing in the Yadkin Valley, which reduced the amount of game available for hunting. He had difficulty making ends meet and was often taken to court for non-payment of debts. He sold what land he owned and to pay off the creditors, and after his father's death in 1765, Boone traveled with a group of men to Florida, which had become British territory at that time, after the end of the war, to look into the possibility of settling there. According to a family story, he purchased land in Pensacola, but Rebecca refused to move so far away from friends and family. The Boones instead moved to a more remote area of the Yadkin Valley, and he began to hunt westward into the Blue Ridge Mountains. Into Kentucky. A brief quote from Daniel Boone here. It was the 1st of May in the year 1769 that I resigned my domestic happiness for a time. I left my family to wander through the wilderness of America in quest of the country of Kentucky. On December the 22nd, 1769, Boone and his brother-in-law and fellow long hunter John Stewart were captured by a party of Shawnee, who confiscated all their skins and told them to leave and never return. The Shawnees regarded Kentucky as their hunting ground. They considered American hunters there to be poachers. Boone, undeterred, continued hunting and explored in Kentucky. Boone returned to North Carolina in 1771, but came back to hunt in Kentucky in the autumn of 1772. In 1773, Boone packed up his family and, with his brother Squire Boone and a group of about 50 others, began the first attempt by British colonists to establish a settlement. Boone was still an obscure figure at that time, The most prominent member of the expedition was William Russell, a well-known Virginian and future brother-in-law of Patrick Henry. Another member of this expedition was Boone's friend and fellow long hunter, Michael Stoner. Included in this group were an unknown number of enslaved blacks, including Charles and Adam. On October the 9th, Boone's oldest son, James, several whites, and Charles and Adam left the main party to seek provisions in a nearby settlement. They were attacked by a band of Delawares, Shawnee, and Cherokees. James Boone and William Russell's son, Henry, were tortured and killed. Charles was captured. Adam witnessed the horror and concealed in riverbank driftwood. After wandering in the woods for about 11 days, Adam located the group and informed Boone of the circumstances of their deaths. Charles' body was found by the pioneers 40 miles from the abduction site, dead from a blow to the head. The brutality of the killing sent shockwaves along the frontier, and Boone's party abandoned their expedition. Businessman and politician. After the Revolutionary War ended, Boone resettled in Limestone, later renamed Maysville, Kentucky, then a booming Ohio River port. He kept a tavern and worked as a surveyor, horse trader, and land speculator. As settlers poured into Kentucky, the border war with American Indians north of the Ohio River resumed. In 1786, Boone took part in a military expedition into the Ohio County led by Benjamin Logan. That's another individual that we'll be talking about in the future programs, his fort is probably about 7 miles from here, or 8. Returning to Limestone, Boone housed and fed Shawnee who had been captured during the raid, and helped to negotiate a truce and prisoner exchange. Although the war would not end until the American victory at the Battle of Fallen Timbers 8 years later, the 1786 expedition was the last time Boone saw military action. As a leader, he served as militia colonel, sheriff, and county coroner. In 1787, he was again elected to the Virginia State Assembly, this time from Bourbon County. He began to have financial troubles after engaging in land speculations, buying and selling claims to tens of thousands of acres. These ventures ultimately failed because of the chaotic nature of land speculation in frontier Kentucky and Boone's poor business instincts. Frustrated with the legal hassle that went with land speculation, and in 1789 Boone moved to Upper River to Point Pleasant, Virginia, now West Virginia. There he opened a trading post and occasionally worked as a surveyor's assistant. That same year, when Virginia created Kanawha County, Boone became the lieutenant colonel of the county's militia. In 1791, he was elected to the Virginia legislature for the third time. He contracted to provide supplies for the Kanakawa militia, but his debts prevented him from buying goods on credit, so he closed his store and returned to hunting and trapping, though he was often hampered by rheumatism. In 1795, Boone and his wife moved back to Kentucky, living on land owned by their son David Morgan Boone in what has become Nicholas County. The next year, Boone applied to Isaac Shelby, the first governor of the new state of Kentucky, for a contract to widen the Wilderness Road into a wagon route. But the contract was awarded to someone else. Meanwhile, lawsuits over conflicting land claims continued to make their way through the Kentucky courts. Boone's remaining land claims were sold off to pay legal fees and taxes. But he no longer paid attention to the process. In 1798, a warrant was issued for Boone's arrest after he ignored a summons to testify in a court case, although the sheriff never found him. The same year, the Kentucky Assembly named Boone County in his honor. Towards the end, Boone was simply just everything was catching up with him. Who knows what? It was a lot of chaos at that time, and just everything was everywhere, and it eventually catches up with you. Here we're going to talk about his trek into Missouri. Having endured legal and financial setbacks, Boone sought to make a fresh start by leaving the United States. In 1799, he moved his extended family to what is now St. Charles County, Missouri, then part of the Spanish Louisiana. The Spanish, eager to promote settlement in a sparsely populated region, did not enforce the official requirements that all immigrants be Catholic. The Spanish governor appointed Boone syndicate, or judge and jury, and commandant of the Femin Osage district. Anecdotes of Boone's tenure as Syndic suggest he sought to render fair judgments rather than strictly observe the letter of the law. Because Boone's land grants from the Spanish government had been largely based on oral agreements, he again lost his land claims. In 1809, he petitioned Congress to restore his Spanish land claims, which was finally done in 1814. Boone sold most of this land to repay old Kentucky debts. Although Boone reportedly vowed never to return to Kentucky after moving into Missouri, stories, possibly folk tales, were told of him making one last visit to Kentucky to pay off his creditors. Boone spent his final years in Missouri, often in the company of children and grandchildren. He continued to hunt and trap and as much as his health and energy would let him. Intruding upon the territory of the Osage tribe who once captured him and confiscated his furs. He visited the very Indians that once captured him. And his death and burial. Boone died on September the 26th, 1820, at his son Nathan Boone's home on Pimmin Osage Creek, Missouri. He was buried next to Rebecca, who had died on March the 18th, 1813. The graves, which were unmarked until the mid-1830s, were near Jeremiah Boone Calloway's home on Turk Creek, about 2 miles from present-day Marthasville, Missouri. Legacy. A quote from Daniel Boone: "Many heroic actions and chivalrous adventures are related of me which exist only in the regions of fancy. With me the world has taken great liberties, and yet I have been but a common man." Boone remains an iconic figure of American history, although his status as an early American folk hero and later a subject of fiction has tended to obscure the actual details of his life. This was taken from WikiLeaks. I had read books in the past about Daniel Boone. They go in much detail, more detail on some of these exploits of when his daughter got captured by the Indians and when he was captured and so forth, and the court-martial. Benjamin Logan and John Howard had a part in that. You know, you get more information. This is a brief summary. Basically, Captain Benjamin Logan and Colonel Richard Calloway, both of whom had nephews who were still captives, surrendered by Boone, brought the charges against Boone for his recent activities. In the court-martial that followed, Boone was found not guilty and was even promoted after the court heard his testimony. Despite the vindication, Boone was humiliated by the court-martial, and he rarely spoke of it. You know, Daniel Boone, that's what I've been trying to say earlier, that he was not the only one that participated in the founding of Kentucky. There were several other men who done just as much, if not more, in some aspects. This Daniel Boone, he was just more out there, you know. And it's not his fault. He didn't ask for it. But I thought you would like this, and stay tuned for more inserts of different individuals, and thank you for watching this video, and you have a nice day.